Welcome, everyone. My name is John Mullin. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of non-fungible and SOMA.finance, and looking forward to hosting and moderating this panel today with a lovely group of panelists talking about the new era of ownership. This is hosted by Digital Art Fair, and we're going to be talking about how ownership has transitioned from the traditional Web 2 world into the Web 3 world that we're kind of now living in, and what that means for each individual and their company and their business. So looking forward to hosting and sharing a little bit more with you guys today. But first, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. And I'll begin with each individual giving a bit of a five-ish minute introduction for themselves. But first, I'd like to welcome Karen Levy, the co-founder of Aika and co-founder of the DSL collection, to give a little bit of a talk about what she's building and the different things she's working in with respect to the new era of ownership.
Thank you very much, GP. Thank you, Digital Art Fair and Gillian and all the panelists. I'm very happy to be with you today. So I'm Karen Levy. I'm the co-owner of DSL Collection. DSL Collection is a collection focused on Chinese contemporary art that started in 2005. And this collection has evolved with technology. We used 2D to virtual reality in 2015, and now also space on the metaverse with other institutions. So far, as a collector, it's been an incredible journey to be able to really open new spaces on digital. And I'm also the co-founder of Aika. So in parallel of this collection, this family collection, I've worked for more than 15 years in the traditional art markets, working for institutions, auction house, and also working in China for the project of the World Expo. And with all these experiences, I saw that there was a turning point for art and for my collection first to really be involved more and be digital, but also to be able to bring experiences for the art. So I co-founded Aika in 2019 to be able to really merge and enable other partners and institutions, artists, as well as corporates, mainly also in the luxury brands, to open new spaces on the digital. And today we've created since 2019 Art Hub on the metaverse. The idea is that we bring together institutions, again, artists and brands, to really create their spaces. So we've been using this metaverse and really trying to make it grow in time for the collection. And right now we have Shenzhen Museum, Pingshan Museum with us on the metaverse. So we have physically a room in Shenzhen, and digitally also on the metaverse Shenzhen, NYU. And we just launched the Ukrainian pavilion that we showcased during Paris Arts Plus. So looking forward to discuss.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And really looking forward to your insights as a collector for the panel. And next up, I'd like to introduce Gary Liu, the founder and CEO of Artifact Labs, also Hong Kong based. So really happy to have you here today, Gary. Can you give us a brief introduction of yourself and Artifact Labs?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. Thanks for Digital Art Fair for inviting us. So I am based in Hong Kong, and Artifact Labs is a relatively small still startup, but it is the continuation of a project that is at this point nearly 2 years old. So the project started off within the South China Morning Post, which is the newspaper of record for the city of Hong Kong, has been reporting on China for the world for well over a century at this point. Previously, I was the chief executive officer of the newspaper. And while I was CEO, the newspaper underwent a 6-year significant transformation from top to bottom. It really was a local parochial newspaper that has now become the most important digital media company that is headquartered in Asia. As part of that transformation, we spent a lot of time thinking about next generation technologies. And of course, one of those technologies was blockchain. By 2018, we were spending a lot of time digging into blockchain and the implications of blockchain technology on media, specifically on the specifically with regard to the storage of media, to the distribution of media, and eventually to the monetization of media. But it wasn't until early 2021 that we found an application of blockchain technology, the NFT, that would have immediate additive impact on the South China Morning Post business. Now, of course, NFTs, as we know here, as a certificate of authenticity, but frankly, what it does is it provides, it creates intrinsic value in digital media for the very first time. Previously on the internet, every time you publish something, you created something online, it immediately becomes infinitely replicable. And as such, kind of drops to zero value very, very quickly because every single copy is exactly like every other copy. However, with the NFT, you'll always have one original copy. You can create scarcity in a world where scarcity didn't exist before. And because of that scarcity, you can have provenance that actually matters. You can have utility that never existed before. And you can actually give away, if you want, rights along with creations and intellectual property. All of those things are just fundamental shifts in the internet history and internet economics and create an astounding amount of opportunity for media and IP companies. That's what we saw as a news organization. So the project Artifact started in early 2021 as a metadata schema or metadata standard project. Our goal was to create a standard that allowed for anything that was really historical, including the archives of a newspaper, to be replicated online and on the chain, but to have with it all of the historical information that immutably imbues it with context and therefore significant and hopefully long-term value. So the project itself over time evolved into a series of NFT products for the STMP that sold extremely well, that created a new community of collectors for news articles and news archives. Over time, the South China Morning Post expects to grow that community along with Artifact Labs. But we also realized that the standard that we created and really the technology behind it was applicable to not just a single newspaper. It was applicable to pretty much any organization with historical IP. Many, many other media companies, to historic brands, to museums, to cultural institutions, universities, you name it. And so earlier this year in 2022, after about running this project for about a year, we announced that we were going to spin it out as an independent company, and that's exactly what we've done. And I left my role as CEO of the newspaper company to become the founder and CEO of the Artifact Lab startup just a few months ago. And we are now working with many of these institutions in the categories I mentioned all across Asia, increasingly talking to people from around the world to help them take existing assets that might be hidden away in an archive and turning them into meaningful virtual assets and creating next generation communities around them.
Amazing. I think that's a super, super cool use case of blockchain technology, and really looking forward to exploring that a little bit more with respect to the new era of ownership that we're going to be talking about today. So really happy to have you here today, Gary. Next up, I'd like to have Joe, the co-founder of Unit London, share with us a little bit more about himself and what he's doing at Unit. I actually just visited their gallery in London about a week or so ago, and it's amazing. So if you're in London, go check it out. Got to give a little plug there, but let Joe take it away. Hope you're on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
I was just saying,
awesome.
I'm sorry I missed you, JP. I hope you had a nice. I hope you had a nice visit.
It was awesome. Next time I'll let you know when I'm swinging by.
That'd be great. That'd be great. So yes, thank you. Thanks, JP, and hi everyone. I'm Joe Kennedy. I'm the co-founder of Unit London. Unit London is a gallery that myself and my childhood friend founded in 2013, and it was really a response to our frustrations with the kind of like archaic system of the art world, because even today it's still very much a system which is based on the people that you know, as opposed to the quality of the work of the artist a lot of the time. So it's not a meritocracy in the art world. It's very much kind of something that's run by social networks, and it's there's an elitist structure to it, which is just inherently built into the value systems of the industry. And as young artists, we wanted to try and break that somehow. We didn't know how at the time, and we didn't have any sort of access to the industry. So really what we did was what anyone would do, starting a business without any resources, which was we set up a Facebook page and a Twitter page and an Instagram page, and we started to post. And you know, at the core of the brand was really this idea of accessibility and trying to create transparency in a market which has been built on the idea of opacity and being kind of guarded when we talk about transactions or when we talk about access to works. So leading with that kind of those principles of transparency and accessibility, we built a gallery which was a pop-up model for 6 or 7 years, and then eventually turned into an established permanent space in Mayfair in London. And we represent artists from all over the world. The gallery became very synonymous with the use of social media as a way of sort of, I guess, promoting and selling art. And at the time, and one of the things I find so interesting about the time we're in right now in the art world, in this kind of like radical period of change, is at the time when we started the gallery, our use of social media and our real devotion to social media was seen as somehow not serious, or, you know, it was sort of immediately derided by the art world because it was seen as not a serious way to promote art or promote artists. And obviously social media being a Web 2 product, we always thought that that was kind of antithetical to like our goals, at least, of getting as many eyeballs on our artist work as possible. Because for us, having 10 million people a week see our content and understand about our artists, learn about our artists, and engage with our artists was way, way, way more exciting for us than making a $5 million sale. So this idea that we could get all of these eyeballs on our work and build communities around the world for our artists, despite being in tiny pop-ups when we started, was like mind-blowing for us. And I think the big aha moment for that was when I think we had 7 million impressions a week on our content on Instagram. And that was like more than the annual visitors to like all of the art fairs in Europe combined. And we were like, okay, this is interesting now. And I think when COVID happened, the art world kind of had to sit up and take notice of like the importance of online and digital channels. And I think a lot of them were quite late to the party, to be honest, in that. And you know, because basically our entrenched vision for the gallery, which was always about innovation and change and trying to modernize an industry which was still so archaic, Web3 really was like the infrastructure, I think, that we'd always been looking for, because the idea of decentralization actually offers a completely new model for the art world, whereby this kind of really hierarchical system of taste and curatorial opinion can be revised and rethought. So last year we launched an NFT platform called Institute, which was really built to try to identify artists who are using blockchain to develop their practice. And often those artists were, you know, digital artists who've been making work for a long time, but had never been able, like as Gary was saying, like never been able to find a value to their work, an intrinsic value, because everything was replicable. So blockchain, I think, like what we're seeing right now is this technology that's providing artists the ability to create a uniqueness really in their work, and therefore be able to monetize it effectively. So whilst for like the past decades, digital artists have been collected but only by very small portions of like the market, a lot of the time through patronage, a lot of the time through maybe sort of institutional shows or biennials where there's no sort of commercial impetus. But now I think over the next 10 years, we're going to start seeing digital artists who are creating really interesting, meaningful work actually be collected in depth by collectors, by galleries, by dealers, and by museums. And we're going to start seeing digital artists really take a foothold in the contemporary art market. So yeah, so I think it's a really, really exciting time for our industry right now. It's going through a lot of change. There's also a lot of resistance, which is exactly the same resistance that we felt back in 2013 with our Web 2 social media push. The same thing is happening now with Web 3, but I think there's a huge amount of momentum in the space, and also a lot of room for sort of, I think there's a real need for articulation of quality. Because last year there was a huge boom, lots of stuff was sold for ridiculous prices. A lot of it was categorized as art when it wasn't really art. So our mission really with Unit London now on our Web3 programming is to identify artists who have a real meaningful voice or using blockchain in novel and interesting ways to create their work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joe. And actually, I've also used the Institute platform and purchased several digital art pieces there, and it's an awesome thing. So I think Gillian is still busy. She's obviously tremendously busy, given that the digital art fair is going on today in Hong Kong. So we'll actually circle back to her, but we do have Gillian Howard, the co-founder and global director of the Digital Art Fair, as well on this panel, and really looking forward to sharing some of her insights with everyone as well. But I think we'll just kind of hop right in and kick off some of the questions for everyone. So the first thing I would kind of like to talk about is how Web 2 versus Web 3 ownership has really changed, and how blockchain and these type of emerging technologies has really impacted how we see art and how we own and interact with art. So I guess this is more targeted for Joe for now, but open for everyone. But how do you think the physical and digital aspects of ownership has clashed or changed between Web 2 and Web 3? This can be with respect to different types of characteristics like space, feeling, or anything similar. So looking forward to hear your thoughts on that, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so we obviously have you know, kind of good experience of both, and we started the gallery obviously selling physical works predominantly, and I think that's obviously the case has been the case for most galleries, because one of the big reasons that digital artists have sort of traditionally been shunned by the art world to some degree, and like sort of forced to, you know, design posters for brands, or you know, design backdrops for DJs and festivals, is because galleries haven't been able, the art market ecosystem hasn't been able to effectively monetize and sell their work. So as much as galleries might want to like support a digital artist, at the end of the day, commercial galleries have to keep the lights on. Advisors have to sell something. So it's been really difficult for those guys. And I think you do have, there's some fantastic galleries. Kate Vass Gallery is one gallery in Switzerland who've championed and supported digital artists for a long time. Postmasters Gallery in New York, also really strong gallery programming that's really supported digital artists through like pre-blockchain periods. But yeah, I mean, we have built a very diverse collector base over the last sort of nearly 10 years since we started the gallery, which is very international. We actually have an amazing collector base in Hong Kong. And I would say, like, versus our gallery peers, our collector base and our audience is more digitally savvy or digitally native, because we are slightly younger as a gallery. And I think naturally the social media user base, particularly like 10 years ago, is much younger than it is now. Interestingly, apparently the biggest consumer base on TikTok is 25 to 45 year olds, which I thought was actually much higher than what I expected. But there is like obviously a massive social media user base that have engaged with our gallery and who follow our gallery and who are familiar with us. So that combined with our sort of broadcasting attitude to showcasing art meant that we had a very big audience. So when we launched our platform last year, we actually had and my hypothesis really was that we would be able to onboard the traditional collectors that we knew who had some sort of crossover into either the crypto world or just the sort of who are more digitally native. But actually, what we found when we launched the platform was that the traditional collectors that worked with the gallery already were still just not ready for the NFT conversation. Obviously, there's a huge amount of hype around NFTs last year, and a lot of it was market based, and a lot of it was very like sensationalist headlines around this sold for 10 million here and 20 million here, and everyone was just kind of confused about why are people spending this much on assets that seem to have no real provenance or history or lineage. So it was quite a crazy market, but we ended up like developing this collector base who found us through like JP. I think that was how we initially connected, was I think maybe even on Discord or Twitter.
It was Discord.
Discord, right? So
I was sharing some of the pieces I bought.
So completely new channel for the art world. So like even Reddit, Twitter, Discord, these kind of like more crypto native, I guess, communities were springing up, and we dove straight into those communities because I thought it was really interesting to open the doors to, of the art world to a collector base who, maybe, haven't been engaged with the art world so much before, or haven't felt invited even to the art world. And so what we've been doing is like finding, just in terms of physical versus digital asset ownership and collecting, the collectors who bought from us originally with Institute and now with Unit London Web3 tend to be crypto natives who understand the value of blockchain and also the importance of what it means to own something digital, like what it means to own a digital asset and why that might be important in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We just launched a physical exhibition at the gallery in London called In Our Code, which was an exhibition in partnership with AOI, who's a very big generative digital art collector. And the show was really interesting because obviously we had lots of traditional collectors come through to the gallery. It's also during Freeze Week in London, so everyone was in town coming in to see the show. And the response from traditional collectors who came in and saw the exhibition, which was really a very immersive experience, screens, that when it came to sort of questions about acquiring the work, their first thing was, well, how do I do this? Like, will you ship this to me? Like, do I put it on my wall? How do I display it at home? And for them, it was very much still about the physicality of owning this object and displaying it in their house. And that's like their primary sort of concern. Whereas what we've always found with the digital art collectors is for them, the value of that ownership actually comes from the provenance of it being on chain and then being in their wallet. So, for them, ownership of an asset within their crypto or their digital wallet, they know that can have utility for them in a metaverse environment in the future. It also broadcasts the social status to their followers online and the online community, who are also very cognizant of what's in each other's wallets and who's buying what at what times. So you're kind of seeing with Web3 now this replication of traditional collecting behaviors, whereby people buy a Mark Rothko, for example, not just because it's a historical painting, but also because the purchase of that painting gives them access to this social club where the gallery will invite them to dinners. They'll be invited to big museum board lunches. It opens this whole world of social access for them, as well as making them look pretty effing cool when they have a dinner party and they have a Mark Rothko hanging behind the kitchen table. But now what we're seeing is basically, and this is why I think this industry is so sustainable. We're seeing a new generation coming through who are their community isn't that dinner party that they invite around to their house. It's actually their community exists online, and what the online community sees is the equivalent of that Mark Rothko that sits in their crypto wallet. And it's in the same way as that Rothko is an expression of the traditional collector's identity. These digital assets are reflections of those this new generation's identity in many ways. That's a very there's a direct reference for that, obviously, with the apes and the punks and the PFP projects, which became people's avatars on Twitter and became their sort of social identities online. But more so, I think we're going to see it, as the metaverse develops and as we kind of enter kind of like almost a mixed reality world, maybe, how these digital assets can be like real badges of social status and expressions of identity in the digital world. So so I think there's a long way to go for traditional collectors, and I'm sort of up against the coalface of this on a daily basis. There's a long way to go for traditional collectors to still understand the concept of digital asset ownership and what it might mean. But it's certainly a very exciting time, and I think we're seeing, even in the last 6 months, we're seeing conversations with traditional collectors move from, oh, what is it, to, okay, like which artist should I be interested in, which artist should I be looking at, and then how do I get a bloody crypto wallet and how do I do that? Can you help me? So that's kind of where we're at right now, but it's definitely cross-pollinating a lot more.
Absolutely. I think it would be great to kind of hear your experience with this as well, Karen, as a collector yourself. How have you and how has your collection kind of evolved, or your family's collection evolved over the period of this kind of radical transition, as you mentioned, Joe, and in the transition from Web 2 to Web 3 collection and ownership? How has that kind of impacted you and what you're seeing in the space?
Yeah, no, so I agree with also with Joe in this new type of collection and collectors, but I think we need to come back to the fact that video art have existed for a very long time, and we've been collecting videos with DSL collection from the beginning of, I would say, contemporary art, which was 1980. In Chinese contemporary art. And so I really think that NFTs are a continuity also and a new medium of art. The only, I would say, a big difference is that NFTs are proof of ownership. I think if we come back to the definition, proof of ownership physically and or digitally. And so I think it's clearly, we own video from the collection, but the NFTs have this certificate, have these experiences that we didn't have when we collected video art. And so I think, from our generation, it has brought, a lot of, we can see, bigger community, the fact that you can sit on your smartphone. This is the first step, and then the metaverse obviously is the next one. And so when we've been creating these metaverse spaces, what I think is NFT is going to be the collecting of the metaverse for sure, and it's going to be the digital collectible. I think we can also call it this way as collectors. But NFTs are also appearing in different industries, not only in arts, but also in real estate, in many more other industries. What is interesting for us on creators on the metaverse, and that's what we try to do, is to bring culture on the metaverse, to create these spaces, to be able to showcase your collection, to be able to show an institution. With the COVID, after the lockdown, we saw that we could not travel the same way. So for us, it's very important to be able to create this social environment with your avatar. Like this panel, we can do it on the in the metaverse. And also, what I was missing a lot as a collector, and why we really pushed these metaverse spaces, is because first, I wanted to see my artworks, but digitally with these tools, and also to be able to sit when I want, because the problem is when you do an exhibition, the next day is off. So I think it's important also to see that it's a continuity. It gives art and culture as a gallery for Joy and the institutions also in the art world, the possibility to have your collection. After the question of this ownership, I think coming back to the subject is very interesting. I would like to say that we collaborated on 2 NFT collections because we wanted to test and learn. And so we collaborated with an artist, Yang Zhexiang, who is an artist based in Paris, from a second generation of Chinese, from artists from China. So he's not a digital native at all. And for him, being able to create these NFTs, we did it with La Collection and Connaissance des Arts, was an opportunity to bring a new community of collectors, but also to be able to also know from his collectors who is buying what, and to share it on the blockchain. So it was very interesting to see. For the artists, it's also very important as collectors today to also kind of authentify and have a certificate with the works that you collect.
Absolutely. Really appreciate that insight. I see that Gillian is now back, so maybe we'll quickly hop over to Gillian to give a quick intro on everything that she's building with the Digital Art Fair, which is just an amazing event happening currently in Hong Kong. And obviously, if anyone's in Hong Kong, they should definitely go check it out.
Hi, everyone. Sorry that I'm a little bit late. I was just trying to deal with some issue at the fair.
Just a little bit busy.
Just a little bit busy, yes. Yeah, I'm the founder and fair director of Digital Art Fair. We started the fair in 2020. It was this is our second year in Hong Kong. We deal with mostly bringing NFT into real life. So showcasing NFT artwork, digital artwork, installation, and we do this, especially something that we focus on quite a lot of technology. So immersive art room using different digital display, and we work with different galleries and partners to showcase the artists that they represent, and different brands that we work with, such as Animoca, The Sandbox, LG and Samsung, several different brands that like focus quite a lot on the new technology display. But yeah, that's a quick intro.
Amazing, thank you so much. So I'll kind of change it in a little bit of a different direction here, and ask a question primarily directed at Gary. So how do you think that Web3 ownership has affected institutions performing historical preservation from a business model perspective? I know that you have been in charge of leading a very traditional kind of media business at SCMP, and obviously you've kind of gone over into the startup space and the Web3 space with Artifact Labs. So I think you have some really interesting insights to share about how that's shifted and how that's kind of impacting that major historical business that is the SCMP.
Sure. So I came from the startup world, actually. The South China Morning Post was a nearly 6-year detour for me. And it was an incredible amount of fun, a huge challenge, but also extremely fulfilling at the end of the day to bring a lot of what I had learned in a career in the technology world into a traditional business like the SCMP. But to get to the core of the question that you asked, what we've been talking about already for the last half hour, and what Joe and Karen have said about how NFTs and blockchain have changed the value of assets of art, and therefore our ability to actually own things that have intrinsic value, that all applies to the media world. It also applies to museums with collections that might be physical assets that in turn can be digitized and turned to 3D models, or any type of merchandising. I think what has really changed is that when media and when sort of digital facsimiles of existing things can have intrinsic value, you change the way that an audience can actually engage with it. The media model today, because of the internet, is incredibly fractured. It may sound extremely simple, but very, very difficult to build a business out of. At this point, the entire history of media monetization has been disrupted, right? And news organizations have really two primary ways of making money. Either gather as many eyeballs as you possibly can and monetize it through ads, or you sell subscriptions and hope that your journalism is different enough, it is valuable enough that people are going to pay you what is effectively an annuity to access the information. Now, neither of those business models, frankly speaking, work for the majority of news publications. It's really unfortunate. They work for some, and those some, and unfortunately, the South China Morning Post is among that some, are the really, really big ones. The ones that really capture a unique story are the newspapers of records for countries, for major cities, for regions of the world. Beyond that, you still have a vast majority of the media space that is trying to figure out how to survive in 2022 and beyond. The business models that exist on the internet don't work. I think at this point, we've kind of proven that. And so there has to be something else. And when it comes to NFTs, now what we can do is we can say that each individual piece of journalism should have its own individual worth. And an open marketplace can decide how important the story is. If the story is the origination of, of civil discourse that changes policies, whether it be, civic policies in a town, in a city, or it's national policies, right, in a country, or even global policies, that story should have a unique and different value. In the existing economics of the media space, every story has effectively average value. When it comes to advertising, everything is down to just literally page views. It's commodity. When it comes to subscriptions, people pay a subscription, but then this effectively subscription value is assigned to all articles in an individual read. And so each individual article gets kind of lost in the fray. News organizations actually struggle to figure out how to deploy resources. They struggle in trying to decide how to actually serve individual readers as well. And so I think that having an NFT model, being able to assign real value to individual articles, is of great advantage to a media organization in the way they think about audience and they think about monetization and creation in the future. For the audience member itself, or the reader, it also means that you have an opportunity to not only be a reader or a subscriber, but to go deeper into the funnel and actually become a stakeholder. Owning an article from a news organization or an asset, it could be a video, it could be a photo, and believing that that asset, because of its historical significance, will increase in value over time, makes you a stakeholder of that news organization. You want that news company to succeed. You want their credibility to be understood by the world. You want their journalists to be known by the world as well. And so for those of us who are, consumer and internet experts and executives, what we have been chasing in the audience space is that level of engagement and that level of stakeholdership in everything that we build. And NFTs kind of create that pre-built community for us. So for those reasons, John, your question was completely on the mark. I actually think that NFTs fundamentally change the business of media because it changes the way that we're able to engage with our users.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. Makes a ton of sense. I think, again, taking it in a slightly different direction, more back to the kind of the collector's perspective, and maybe also from your perspective as a gallerist, how have you seen the kind of generational change occur as a collector or as a gallerist with respect to this new wave of digital art and also kind of digital art that's replicated or sold or transposed on the blockchain? Have you noticed that within your kind of own communities that something's has shifted, or is it just the next thing? Either for Karen or for Joe, whoever wants to kind of take the first stab.
Karen, do you want to crack on?
Go ahead, Joe. I'll let you go first.
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. That's a really interesting question because I think for a while now we've been experiencing a sort of a generational shift from, I guess, sort of the boomer generation to the sort of to the millennial generation, and now we're seeing the generations below that. I heard about Gen Zero recently, which was a new one, but these younger generations who are huge consumers of online content and who are essentially interacting with the world in radically new ways. And over the last 10 years, I think there has been this big shift from a huge pass down of wealth from from the older generations to the younger generations. I've noticed that in particular in Asia with our clients from China and Hong Kong, Taiwan, who there's a lot of younger generations, young millennials, and Gen X, who have lots of disposable income and who are starting to collect, and their behaviors, their communication behaviors, the way they interact with their friends, the way that they discover artists and interests, the way that they connect with other people around the world based around shared interests is completely different to their parents' generation. And so there is this kind of generational shift happening in broad culture, and I think that trickles down into our industry, and in the art market we now see very much like a new generation of collectors who who belong to a different sort of wealth class, really. I mean, I think 20 years ago the majority of wealth was inherited wealth. So you had like a leisure class who generally had a lot of time on their hands. They didn't necessarily need to work, so they could spend their weekends kind of leisurely walking around galleries in Mayfair or in Chelsea in New York and developing very deep relationships with galleries and spending time to really understand the work. They're sort of like connoisseur collectors, and they really kind of like helped to build the contemporary art market. But I think now we have a lot more self-made money. We have a lot more the rise of this new sort of breed of collector, if you like, who are much more time poor, who have very different interests, very different behaviors, very different day-to-day a different day-to-day ecosystem in terms of how they go about their lives. And I think that has also seen the boon of art fairs, because an art fair essentially gives somebody a one-day snapshot supposedly of the entire art market for people who basically have no time to go and understand or educate themselves. They can do it very quickly in one day. Also the rise of art advisors, who now most big collectors have advisors who kind of filter the art world and material for on behalf of collectors, to make it as simple as possible for them and as quick as possible for them to collect. So yeah, we have a new generation of collector, I think, and now particularly with crypto, we have another sort of like class of collector who I kind of mentioned it or touched on it before, but you know, this class of collector don't really haven't had exposure to the art world because they haven't been sort of invited to the dinners or the parties. They you know, they are also probably, you know, they have conflicting ideologies. Like the art market is a very centralized hierarchical place, and the crypto ideology really is based on decentralization and transparency of transactions, provenance, everything is on chain. So you have kind of two conflicting worlds here. And I think what's really interesting right now is to see, and what we're trying to do as a gallery is this challenge of, well, how do we reconcile this decentralization with this centralized system that we currently exist in? How do we bring crypto collectors into transacting in the art world through increased transparency, through accessibility, and maybe even through new aesthetics and new artists who are practicing on-chain mechanics or who use blockchain in some way in their practice? And then also, how do we educate the traditional collectors on what it means to own digital art and collect digital art, and give them an insight into what the future might look like, and get them interested in artists who have found a new lease of life through blockchain. So there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of like cross-pollination that needs to happen across the audiences. You know, it's not easy because again, we touched on it before, but a lot of the art world ecosystem, the community is on Instagram. And Instagram is pretty much as radical as you'll get them to go for the most part. The idea of, you know, me telling a couple of our like art collectors from the gallery that you should jump on our Discord, for them, a lot of that is just a completely bizarre concept. That the fact that they could be a part of this buzzing online community where they can have a back and forth dialogue with complete strangers. You know, for them, it's like they almost don't have the time, or they don't have, you know, the bandwidth to really like sustain those conversations and have those conversations online. So yeah, there's multiple layers to that challenge. It's both like an infrastructural one, because the channels that they're using and the channels that they're on to communicate and interact with the world are fundamentally different. They're in like different echo chambers. Then there's also the ideological layer of like, well, you know, I don't like that the art world doesn't tell me how much this sold for, or that the gallery doesn't tell me what's available when I ask. And then finally, there's the sort of the aesthetic challenge of, you know, I think when NFTs boomed, there was a lot of work that was being sold that were basically VC created money-making schemes, which were sort of masquerading as art, but actually there was no real artist involved. There was the recruiting of a designer who would create a sort of a swathe of cats or dogs or crypto frogs or whatever. You know, every day there was a new sort of zoo animal with the word crypto in front of it, and I think that was a really it helped to stigmatize like the NFT market, and a lot of people saw that and were like, well, no, this doesn't correlate with what I view as art, therefore I'm not interested in NFTs or blockchain as an entire premise. And I think that's kind of unfortunate. But I think what we are seeing now is, you know, during this kind of bear market in crypto, we're seeing a huge correction of a lot of that stuff that was sold for insane prices, which had no utility and no artistic merit, which is now basically unsellable. And you're seeing the really interesting artists who are, you know, making meaningful work, meaningful practice actually grow. And it's interesting when people characterize the current state of like the crypto or NFT market, when people read headlines and it's like, you know, NFTs are down and crypto's down, and a lot of people are like, oh, I told you so, you know, I knew it was going to happen, and you know, you shouldn't have done this. And actually, if you look at the broad market, like, yes, of course, it's tanked in a big way, and a lot of people lost a lot of money who bought things that had no artistic merit and no utility. Like I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and I saw this post which was like Logan Paul had bought this something for like 700,000, and it was like a Pikachu or something that looked like a Pikachu.
Now worth $10 or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's now worth $10. And then, you know, if you look at the comments, everyone's like, I told you this is going to happen. NFTs are a fad and da, 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 da. But then, you know, that becomes the broad characterization of the market. But then if you look at the, like, you know, maybe the 5% of the market, which is, or even less, which is actually characterized as like digital art, like, you know, contemporary digital art created by artists. If you look at that small subsection of the market, it's been steadily increasing. You know, you have artists like Tyler Hobbs, for example, who's an on-chain generative artist, was actually practicing as an artist before blockchain became a thing, but he rose to become one of the highest selling artists on art blocks. And he's now, you know, a very well-regarded contemporary artist in his own right. And his market is stronger than ever. We actually have a solo exhibition of his work in London in March next year. But there's artists like this who, you know, if you look at their work and their category as a subsection of the market, is super strong. It's incredibly vibrant and dynamic and growing the whole time. But unfortunately, they're getting lumped in with the Pikachus and you know, the sort of JPEGs that grab the headlines. So I think now is the time in this sort of market correction where we see the sort of the rubbish being filtered out, and more attention and deep focus going into the artists and the creators who are building really meaningful things, which I think will have, you know, really strong, sustainable long-term value.
Absolutely. How about some insights from your side, Karen?
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. I wanted to say, because, you know, when we created this collection with this artist, you know, Yang Zhexiang, and actually with for the Ukrainian pavilion, when we created the space on the metaverse, we also implied with NFT. I mean, it's intergeneration of collectors. I mean, we got my parents to collect an NFT. We have a younger community, can be you know, crypto investors, and it's interesting because now they're all part of the same community. And I think this is what is Web3 also for us, is this economy of creators. It's this economy of collaboration as well in different generations. And I think we, you know, apart from the numbers, we have to look at the bigger picture that is happening here also, in terms of, you know, bringing teams together to create, artists, curators, architects, and the fact that now on a NFT contract, you're going to have maybe a few people that are going to be part of it. You're going to have the artists, the NFT platform, and then the buyers of these NFTs are really from different generations. And I also wanted to say, on coming back on what Gary I thought was really interesting, is what we see and what we're trying to infuse with this metaverse project, and what we've been trying to do was to really you know, help institutions to bring new business revenues. And I think NFTs, as well as creating metaverse digital spaces, not only going to allow them to be outside of their physical space, but to really bring this ability of the public to also maybe own, also be part of the community of the museum, but also to have some works of the museums. And we saw that with Okusai and the British Museum, because I think, you know, there were about thousands of NFTs, and people now show on their smartphone the fact that they own a digital work of Okusai. And I think what Gillian also is doing with the digital art fair is very pioneer, because, you know, when you come to the art fairs, you know, from Frieze to the rest, there's no digital art. And I think it's very important today to bring to the generation, to the public, this medium, and to be able to really for people to experience it, to have time to understand. There is a big moment now of educating people. There is a big moment also of you know, I would say the government also to kind of increase this movement. And there was a report from the Ministry of Culture in France regarding the tokens, the ownership, where, you know, this has the challenges is going to be really on on how we can create a continuity, a long term with this Web3, with this NFT and metaverse. And we really are part of it. And we, with DSL or Aika, really trying to like all of you here, trying to really bring forward this movement in terms of creating an ecosystem, but also a more legal challenge and setup for the metaverse and NFT, and bring people together, bring the museums, brings, you know, people that are not necessarily in the digital age in such a way. So I think this is really important to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of anecdotally, it was kind of funny because I was actually at Frieze London just a few weeks ago, and I was taking a little tour with Tim Marlowe, and he was asking me, what kind of art do you like? And I was like, generative digital art. And he was like, oh, okay, we don't really have a whole lot of that here, because I was actually at the Frieze Masters, so completely different, which is kind of funny. But anyway, actually, I think it's a good segue though into asking Gillian a little bit more about how she's seen it as an art fair director. Like, how have you seen the kind of the attendance, and what's the makeup of the attendees who's coming to the digital art fair? Is it, you know, traditional art collectors? Is it crypto people? You know, and do you see kind of a demographic difference as well with kind of the makeup of the attendees?
Thanks, JP. I'm sorry that when Joe was talking, I was just kind of laughing because I find it like I think that you can articulate the points that I share with you so much better. And it was such a insightful share of what you observe in London compared to what I observe in Hong Kong. And those kind of like, it's just completely the same. Is the idea of that, what Joe was sharing earlier about the new generation, how they look at NFTs. Then back to what JP was asking, the demographic last year, let me share a little bit of figures. Over 70% of our visitors are under 45 years of age. Our youngest art collector last year was 13 years old. 13. Yeah, I know, but he was opening. That's insane. He came with his parents, obviously. His parents also are collector. And I think after 30 minutes, he said to his mom, he said, like, I want to buy this with my money. I'm going to buy this. And he opened a MetaMask account right away at the fair. And he bought his first NFT. It was not very expensive. I think it was 1 to 2 ETH, something like that. But he really liked it, and his parents supported him to, you know, you want to collect a piece of art by yourself. He was 13. Okay, great. So that was our youngest art collector. I think overall we have traditional art collector because we did a collaboration with Sotheby's last year to sell the Anadol collection. So the collectors from that kind of like level with traditional art collectors is buying like $1 million blue chip artwork that worth collecting. But there are also, I would say, if I remember correctly, I will give the number back to you, confirm number later on, but remember correctly, over 50% of our art collectors are under 40 years of age, which is a very, very important figure. Half of the collector at Digital Art Fair are under 40 years of age. And the oldest art collectors, if I remember correctly, was 67 years old. 67 years old, meaning that they've been collecting art for a while, and digital art is something that they're interested in. The overall figures, demographic this year is pretty much the same, but we can see even a younger demographic this year. I would say that over 80% of our visitors are under 45 years of age. So which is a very, very strong figure in saying that what kind of attraction that we're getting out there for the younger generation, what are they interested in? I think that if we compare that to a traditional art fair, the number will be quite different, right? Like majority of the collectors will be over 45 years of age. So that's something that I learned through the last 2 years. And I wanted to like add on a little bit of what Joe was saying about the correction of the NFT market, and I got that asked a lot about, you know, those different profile picture and different things like that. I think different generations has different sort of tastes about the art that they like. Either there's going to be pixelated art, or is either going to be a animation like XCopy, or like some sort of like still related to like someone recently told me that they think Ferocious, one of the very famous NFT artists, is comparable to Basquiat, right? Which is something that like people say, oh, this is a new Basquiat of our time, which is also something that's quite interesting to see, because I think each era has their own sort of taste. Either we like it or not. For example, if we look at contemporary art versus street art, some people would say, oh, street art is not art. And arguably, people will say, oh, but we got Banksy, or we got who and who, we got JR, we got different artists that are really worth looking at. But then there are always going to be someone saying that, oh, it's pixelated, it's nothing worth looking at. If you look at contemporary art, you got the black square. People are like, why are you painting a black square? Why is it worth any sort of money? Why is it in the museum? I think overall the art history, there are always going to be a conversation that people will say, this worth nothing. This is absolutely rubbish. And studying art history, we learn so much from it. And I believe this next 5 years or 10 years will be very interesting to see how a new, I would say, new genre of art kind of develop over the years. And we're really fortunate today to hear so many of your experts' advice and your opinion on how this is going to evolve.
Yeah, I think I've always said that, my children, I don't have kids yet, but when I do have children, they will definitely have a crypto wallet before they have a bank account. So I think this kind of shift is just, it's inevitable, right? And definitely an interesting kind of demographical change. Just want to flip it over to Gary real quick as well to kind of, see how his audience has changed as well, because obviously the shift from, a much very traditional industry into a kind of a Web3 and digital-based economy with respect to media is a very interesting shift as well. And has your viewership changed from a demographic perspective, or how are you kind of reaching this new level of viewer?
Yeah, we weren't sure coming into this experiment when the project was still a project within the Post, the newspaper, whether or not this project was going to introduce a new demographic of people to news or a new demographic of people to NFTs, which way the funnel was going to go. We very quickly realized that right now it's monodirectional, it's not bidirectional. What we are doing is that we're bringing new users who previously cared about the South China Morning Post only as a brand, something that they knew, to become collectors of South China Morning Post assets. We're not actually bringing the old school, I really shouldn't say average newsreader, because at the end of the day, actually, the South China Morning Post readership around the world is north of 100 million per month now, and it's actually quite young. But we're not bringing traditional news addicts into the NFT world just yet. That has a lot to do with infrastructure. We all know that actually onboarding somebody into NFT world is extremely difficult, right? Wallets are still not user-friendly. On-ramps for currencies, even things that you can buy using credit cards, are still broken from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, right? There is no global, there's no simplicity in sort of global onboarding of people into the Web3 world. So that infrastructure stuff needs to be fixed before we can actually start scaling the Web3 world and introducing NFT collecting to more and more people. But we can go the other way. We can introduce the people who are already degens in some way to different types of collecting. Like I mentioned up front, I'm not selling PFPs. I mean, we're doing as a studio, we're doing really interesting PFP projects that are really patronage and membership projects for traditional institutions. But the South China Morning Post experiment, and the majority of what we work on with other clients, is memorabilia. These are priced at anywhere between $20 to $40 each. These are not thousands of dollars. These are not one of one fine art replicas in the digital world. Because right now, I personally don't think that the world at scale is ready for that kind of collecting yet. But collecting things that are cheaper, that they can hold as something that augments their digital identity in their wallet, and especially buying these things that unlock a community and therefore unlock experiences and discourse that they were previously not privy to, that I think is extremely interesting. So bringing degens and Web3 native people into the world of collecting more traditional assets, those are that's the audience that I'm working with right now, and I find it fascinating.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I actually have an interesting kind of anecdote on that as well, because I purchased when Fortune came out with, or Fortune or Forbes, I can't remember. It came out with that kind of crypto cover that had like different NFT artists and things all over it.
Yeah,
I actually got a physical Forbes, yeah, right. So I got a physical version of it and framed it. Unfortunately, I don't have an NFT of that, which I would much prefer. Because right now I have a frame of this picture that honestly doesn't sit, it just sits in storage at my house. So I think, that idea of bringing things into the digital world and that level of ownership is kind of the embodiment of what we've discussed today. And we are at time. So I do want to, just say thank you to all the panelists for the really, really interesting discussion and insights. I think, we really got into the deeps and depths of how ownership has changed and how this, is a generational shift, a radical shift, as Joe called it, in how people see and own and transact with all different types of things that they own in both the digital art space, memorabilia, collectibles, media, and it's really been an interesting discussion. So again, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks to Gillian and the Digital Art Fair for hosting. Again, if anyone is in Hong Kong, make sure to go check it out, the fair. I actually haven't even checked it out yet because I've been traveling, but I will make sure to beeline over there ASAP. And again, just thank you everyone for your time. Hope you enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, JP. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
See you all soon.